Let's focus a bit on security today. What is the real impact of AI on security and what isn't? What can we learn about insider threats from what's happening with Doge and what impacts on CISA are we tracking? Bryant G. joins me today. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. It's Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. And I'm Dave Sobel. We'll be taking questions and comments throughout the show, so make sure to put them in chat. If you've got a question, we will happily respond to it. And I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. Now, a reminder, I am watching chat. We'll take those questions live. Bryant G. is the Chief Security Officer at LeapFrog Services, bringing over 25 years of experience in technology, cyber risk management, and physical risk management. In his role, he leads a team that assists clients in developing comprehensive security programs encompassing strategy, governance, and operations, with a focusing on managing risk through LeapFrog's Ring of Security methodology. His leadership extends to various industry organizations, including the Department of Homeland Security Sector Coordinating Council, ISSA, ISACA, and as a board member and vice president of InfraGard National Members Alliance. Bryant, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Wouldn't my mother be proud?
Yeah, it's the big achievement, right? To be on live internet broadcasting.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you on a couple of different topics. First, I kind of want to baseline a little bit of AI impact is what we're seeing in cybersecurity. And what interested me was an article that felt like just an acceleration, and I want to sort of start from there. I noted that a recent phishing campaign targeting Gmail users revealed what they called an alarming use of artificial intelligence by cybercriminal. The FBI warned in May of last year about the rising threat of those attacks, which leverage AI to create communications that can lead convincingly to identity theft. The AI-driven scams often begins with calls claiming that a user's Gmail account has been compromised, urging the target to provide the recovery account. Victims then receive seemingly legitimate emails from Google that add to the deception. Right? This use of generative AI feels like we're making phishing better. That seems like a really basic bit. Am I right to think about this as acceleration? Is there more going on with AI that we want to think about from a cyber perspective?
Yeah, there is. And first of all, let me say I love that you send articles so we kind of have a common point where we can start. That is fantastic. But what I do want to, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball back and
Cool.
go to the very end. And at the end of that article, I thought it was very well written, by the way. But at the end of that article, it gives you the list of things to prevent the attacks. Mm-hmm. Right? There's like 5 things. And if you erased the AI off of it, there is zero change. It is the exact same thing. So my point to all this is, yes, there is an accelerant. There's an arms race, if you will, between all these things, and we'll get into that. Phishing is such the elementary version of the thing, kind of where people start the conversations, but certainly not where it needs to be ending up. And I've got some ideas perhaps for you on that. But the interesting thing to me about that was, even at the end of the article, literally, if you took the AI out of the topic of the things that you need to do to prevent, quote, AI phishing, remove the AI, it's all the exact same defenses. So my thought beyond, my thought as a result of that is, how widespread, how effective is this actually being if the defense mechanisms are not altered in any way?
Okay, so I'll bite on that one, because in particular, as I was thinking, where I wanted to go with the accelerant was one of the things that I think generative AI in particular, I'm making it generative versus just broadly AI, is that it's going to make these attacks a lot more consistent and look a lot more legitimate. So, for example, one of the things that I find in using generative AI tools is they're quite good at transforming existing elements. I could say, make this email into 5,000 different customized versions for this list of users. So rather than having to build this by hand, now you can systemize it, and you have a certain degree of quality control that you can make it look consistent. And I think it's what I look at this and say, well, you're right. It's not different. What it is we're opening a bit of a fire hose of accelerant.
Markedly better. Absolutely. Yeah.
Wouldn't there have to be some changes to the defense to handle that much more of a volume of attacks?
Yeah. Okay. So more of the same doesn't really affect us, like I was saying, but more of the accelerant. I like that you use that word. Is very very true. The days of the Nigerian prince, or the very very poor English, and those kind of things, or websites that look a little bit off. Those days are gone, right? So the fundamental shift in the defense, if you will, is just we have to. This is where I mentioned the arms race. We have to be as good as they are getting better. And there are still there's a lot of signatures, if you will, and things that are very noticeable in patterns and heuristics and in those kind of things when AI is used to develop those things that are still fairly noisy. That most of your spam, email, mimecasts, and those kind of things are able to pick up fairly easily. And that is going to evolve. They're going to figure out what that is and how to get around those things. So it's like I said, it's an arms race. But yeah, the defense techniques don't really change, but we have to be a whole lot better at it. So I think you're exactly right. Now, what's missing? The next step beyond all of this are actually how AI is being used in those ways, right? And I would say probably the biggest thing that concerns me more than anything, the top two, as I'll say, is in these deep fake images. There was a new model that was released a couple weeks ago that I'm not going to brag about too much and give it a name, but the deep fake videos, the voice impersonations and the video impersonations can literally be modeled with less than 10 seconds of footage. We used to see, Tom Cruise all the time or some celebrity where there's this monumental amount of learning capability around the, movies and whatnot. But that time has become so reduced. And I'm going to give you a quick example that we found out about. I guess it's been a month or two ago, where a CEO was dialing into a board of directors Zoom meeting and was claiming to be on the plane. Um, it was a deep fake video of that CEO having problems with their video and voice connection. And that video needed to be about 10 seconds of him in the deep fake going, I can't really hear, and messing with the camera and doing all that. He said, well, this isn't working. I'm going to chat. So now he's back on chat. Everybody in the meeting saw the physical version of them that was a deep fake. We're going to be using this and investing in that and blah blah blah. And I need $25 million to be sent to this account, and it went all because of a deepfake video, right? So those things, we see even public officials are using it as an example. It's really, really interesting. So, just even seeing or hearing somebody anymore is really not really enough.
Well, I mean, it goes even further than that. I mean, we did a test with my own producer. I was able to fool my own producer with AI versions of me
Yeah,
already. I mean, it's incredibly cheap and easy to produce. I don't think it is a stretch to say we'll be at the level of, if you remember the sort of like '90s soundboard fake call-in shows where they would play
right.
a celebrity. Like, it doesn't feel like it's that much further. Where almost in real time you're typing it in and translating. You don't even need to just have the 10-second fake. You'll quickly be able to point where someone's just typing and the AI avatar will do it. So what does that change in terms of the way that security professionals need to be working with organizations to change procedures? How does that have to change?
Yeah. So the thing I both love and hate about this entire topic is that there are no blinky lights. This is not a cyber problem that you're going to install a tool and it's going to fix this problem for you, right? You mentioned in the opening the ring of security methodology. right? Which is basically people, processes, technology, facilities, right? Meet and the whole core of that is looking beyond IT for where the inherent risks are within the business, right? So, in having said that, again, the fundamental differences in the defense is in validation of payment request, payment source before it goes. The fundamental defense doesn't change. The capability, and I loved your word of the accelerant to the persuasion capability of that is now, now it's off the charts. But the fundamental change is still having things like passcode lists that each group has, that when you say, okay, you want me to change this, what's next on our passcode list that is not exchanged digitally? It's exchanged in mail, or even handing it to somebody or something like that. There's a list, and then you know that, okay, so ABCXYZ 1 2 3 4, whatever that next code is, that person has that code, and it is not in any kind of digital format. So, I mean, that kind of a thing that you put in, there's no tool for that, right? That is a process. There is a procedure. There's a governance model, and there's dozens of them that we could talk about and input as part of the processes. But a deepfake capability is merely an accelerant to the persuasion power to get to that bit. And those are business email compromises, right? That's what the FBI labeled them years ago, Beck attacks. But the Beck attacks are the same. The defense beyond or for Beck attacks is the same. But they're getting so much better, and they're becoming so much more successful with it. And I hope that organizations are finally looking towards alternate forms of authentication of payment changes and those kind of things, right?
My wife thought I was crazy when I said we needed a family passcode in order to start like talking about
Yeah,
these things.
safe words. I mean, we've
Yeah.
been doing that. I mean, that coming out of when we were kids, we had a safe word that we would always use with our family.
Right.
Yeah.
So that feels to me, I want to get a little bit of a validation because it feels like this is the portion of security that's much more important than the back end software element of it. Like I actually think that, again, I think there's an accelerant element going on to both defenders and offense's
Right.
ability to attack, but I feel like it's this portion of the conversation that's much more important. Give me a little bit of your sense of that balance between what we should be looking at from the software side versus what we should be looking at the process side.
Yeah. So if we go back to our ring of security methodology, what we discovered over the years is that even if you do your technology perfectly, you're still covering about half of your attack surface. Now, that number can't be quantified because, frankly, it varies from industry to industry with IoT heavy industries and so forth, right? So, but the point to that is that if you go back, Dave, and look at the headline breaches over the past year, and you do the root cause analysis on any of those breaches, when you get down to your fifth whys, right? If you're using the five whys methodology developed at Nissan that we've all been using for root cause for years, but when you get down into that, all of them, not some, not a majority, all of them will come back to an error, a flaw, somebody missed something in governance. Something happened somewhere that something was not taken care of. And I know it's a bit stale, but it affected all of us in the Equifax breach, right? Those patches had been out for 6 months. So,
Right.
where exactly was the failure? Was it in resources? Was it in change management? Where was the failure that those patches did not get put in place to solve that breach before it happened and cost them? I don't remember what the number was, something like close to $1 billion. And most people on the planet, certainly in North America, were affected by it, right? So, it's always comes down. We often blame the technology, but when you're talking about this balancing act, having proper governance in place, and we can go down the list. As we move things into SaaS applications that we're using even right now. Third party risk There are entire conventions put on by the Global Business Resiliency Foundation on nothing but TPRM. It even has its own acronym now that it didn't have years ago. Right, third party risk is absolutely huge in what we do. So just as just a couple things that we can list in governance that are critical.
Now, I'm going to remind listeners, if you're watching and you want to throw a question or comment in there, we will take those in real time. But Brian, this is a great talking about governance is actually a good opportunity to pivot to sort of my next topic, and I'm going to set the ground loose for listeners a little bit. Is I'm going to bring up something that often is politically charged. I do not want to have a political conversation here, but I'm using it to stimulate a conversation that I think is interesting. We've all been tracking what is going on with the Department of Government Efficiency and their actions moving around the federal government, with some level of uncertainty of what's going on there specifically. The intention appears to be to do a level of audit. Whether or not the access to systems to sensitive systems is been fully legal or not is a current open level of question. What I want to do here is talking about they've been looking at Treasury Department and OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, Department of Labor. Workers have filed lawsuits. That's not the bit I want to talk about. What's interesting to me here is this feels instinctively like the idea of an insider threat. And when insider people do not follow standards and norms in organizations. And where, Brian, what I wanted to get a little sense of is to talk a little bit from your perspective, because I'm thinking about what would happen in a organization if internal actors started ignoring rules. The classic one that I might think of is there's oftentimes a lot of owners that simply say, I won't do two-factor authentication. Right? They just refuse to do it. And then you either have to change the policy or bad things happen. Like it becomes very unquestionable. Talk to me a little bit about the best way of kind of policy enforcement in organizations when insiders refuse to follow policies.
Yeah. So insider threats are huge, as you can imagine. But I will say this just about insider threats overall, and then I want to go down into the details as you asked. Most of the insider threats that we see in our security operations center are typically accidents.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that's accidentally accessed something or clicked on something or whatever, and there are very, very few that we see in our SOC. Even when I was managing the security operations centers, and the services at Unisys and CSC, when I was chief security officer there, we only really, probably in my career, I've probably come across 5 or 6, on certainly on 2 hands that you can count, that were that were very malicious, maybe beyond trying to steal a customer list or some of those kind of things. All right, so most of those kind of things are typically accidental. So how do you prevent them? Is in zero trust, right? We have to assume. I mean, really the zero trust framework. And that is a very, very nebulous term, and it means a lot of things to a lot of different people, really depending on the vendor that's trying to sell it to you at a particular case. But for the purposes of our discussion, just the presumption of breach inside
Mm-hmm.
the organization. So the proper segmentation, the need, the role based access control on need, not well. We all know need to know, right? Giving them the access that they need, but even taking that a bit further, and the access that they need when they need it. So maybe even some time controls around there. But we look at things like data throttling. There's no reason for 2 gigabytes of data for a normal user to be suddenly tried to, for that attempt to be right. So we should be alerting on. So there are technologies and controls, that you put in place around a zero trust framework that would essentially, I don't say stop, because we don't ever speak in absolutes in the security world, but it would certainly slow it down enough, or it would alert enough that there could be some, you would notice there would be some alternate actions and something along those
Right.
lines.
Okay. So, and I get that. Like, it makes sense that most is accidental.
Yeah.
And I think we understand, like, there's a procedure of correction and training that goes through an accidental.
Hmm.
Let's talk about something a little bit interesting here. Like, what happens when it's malicious, right? Like, what
Yeah.
are the avenues that organizations have to push back on that?
Okay, that's a very, very good and a very interesting question. I'm going to throw you another curveball on governance. You ready?
Okay.
It starts at the higher.
Right.
Acceptable use policies. And now I'm going to come back to you with AI, right?
Okay.
So acceptable use policies, and I'll give you an example. Going into a network and finding a gambling site that's being run on your network.
Hmm.
True story. We went into a network in the Midwest. It's actually a very long story, but we found a terabyte of child pornography operating inside an insurance company, using for spam or whatever. And the defense is you didn't tell me not to.
Okay.
Right. So because you didn't have that acceptable use policy in place to tell somebody very specifically not to use your network in that way, now you could potentially be criminally liable for aiding, abetting, or whatever legal. Not a lawyer, but whatever
Sure.
term. Yeah. Right. So it starts there, and then coming back to your initial topic on AI, when we're going in and talking to clients about adoption of AI, it starts with acceptable use. Telling your users what they are allowed to do with AI, what data is allowed to be used and is not allowed to be used. I think that's going to come up in your Doge comments, right? Because there's some questions about that type of data, and there's been some accusations of that data going into AI, which I would absolutely 100%. I'm not even a little bit surprised that Elon Musk and his team is using an AI type of, I'm sure, agentic, I should say, AI in summarizing some of these things. I feel very, very confident that it is not going into Chat GBT, especially on the public side, right? So I would suspect, and I do not know this, but I would suspect that being Elon, there is a stand up of Grok in some way that they're using privately for that. Now I can neither confirm or deny that, but knowing how these things work and knowing Elon Musk and his typical methods of operation, that would be my suspicion.
Right. So it's a great example, and again, I'm using it as an example to talk about the. So many Americans might be concerned that their private information that is stored, within these government systems may be being used by AI systems in ways we are unclear about, and and may be managed in ways that we're uncomfortable with. I'm using that to talk about, like, to then translate and say, in in the businesses that our joint kind of customers think about, how are the best ways to handle when it is kind of intentional, uh, either rule breaking or or pushback along those lines. So say some employee decides, hey, I want to get my work done better, and I think I can push through and make the company more money by breaking these security policies. How do you enforce that insider threat? What are the effective ways to use policy, procedure, governance, I don't know, the law? Like, what are the ways that you actually enforce that? Because I would think, and I want you to push back, if they are able to be disregarded, they become non-functional.
Right. Yeah. So starting back with the acceptable use, right? So it starts there, and you try to govern it in such a way to, and most of this comes around training. I mean, certainly, I mean, you want to ask Samsung, right? They've become the poster child for this exact topic when they have their engineers posting code for something as innocuous as just simply reviewing the code for errors, or maybe taking a critical meeting and putting the minutes from that meeting in and asking for a summary. Those are very common things that we would be using basic generative AI for. But the way I like to describe that is that salt in the ocean. Right. Once you pour that in, it's there. So preventing it, well, first of all, we have to be able to alert on it. We have to know when it's happening. And that is a very difficult thing to do on AI because your data is going out through a browser. right? It's on. You're opening, Firefox or Chrome, Edge, whatever, and you're interacting via text through a secure channel, TLS or what have you, into these bots, and then information is being popped up on the screen. It's not like a malware code is coming in that has to be found and sandboxed and detonated and all these kind of terms that we use around that. It's literally coming in and out in some uploads, maybe some documents, some pictures going back and forth perhaps, and some text. So it is very, very difficult to spot. I know there are some technologies, and again, I don't want to get into names, but there are a few technologies that are being developed. I'm seeing we're actually experimenting with a couple of these that are pre-browser. I'm going to call it the kill chain, right? So when you go through, as I'm talking, so as that data is being put in, and it goes in, and then it goes into the agent, and then comes back, knowing about it as I started off with, and getting something that is a detection agent and an alerting agent and perhaps even a prevention agent at the browser level before it goes, that's where the industry really needs to be focusing on, and what that actually looks like. So I'm hoping that is, we talked about an arms race. On the good guys side, that needs to be the absolute forefront of the battle, and coming back to your topic of the insider threat and keeping that data from going out. First of all, we have to tell our users and govern it that it doesn't. Then we have to be able to be alerted on it when it does, and then we have an action to take as a result. And then depending on what that is, whether or not we're simply detecting on it, whether or not we're blocking it, whether or not we're taking action against the user itself and deleting or suspending accounts maybe, or something like that. So there's a workflow that goes along with all of that.
Gotcha. And a reminder for anybody watching, if you've got questions or comments, throw them in the chat and we will definitely address them. Now, Brian, as I started, you brought up a little bit of the stuff that I was even going to in terms of thinking about the governance and the oversight of this. I want to get a little bit of your reaction and thinking, particularly with your experience working with Department of Homeland Security. One of the areas that I've been keeping an eye on is developments over at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, as well as some of the stuff going on at Department of Homeland Security around some of their advisory boards. There feels like there's a refocusing of some of their efforts. As somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about threat detection, running a SOC, what are the resources and key elements that you're keeping an eye on in those agencies to make sure that, we have a continued steady hand and we're getting what we need from those organizations as a security community?
Yeah. So coming back to your comment there about seeing a shift, right? So Biden had an executive order on AI that was, as you would expect from that ideology, if you will, that was very, I'm going to make up my own word and call it guardrail-y, right? So we want to make sure that, and we're doing and we want to make sure it's protected and it's all this. And, with the new administration that's in there, that as we've seen with Doge and a lot of other things, that is a lot more aggressive, a lot more private innovation, lifted that executive order and has put something else in that inspires that at the private level. So with Jen Easterly's departure, and I'm forgetting the name of the guy that they just put in. Maybe you have it in front of you, but he doesn't have any cyber experience.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's literally no cyber experience from this guy, and I should have the notes in front of me, so I apologize for that. But the general thinking, I think, and if you're asking for my opinion on that, is one of the things that I've seen in some of the other cabinet positions and so forth is having a fresh opinion, having a fresh take, not being, I mean, maybe not having a cyber background is going to cause somebody like that that has an excellent administrative history, has an excellent success history with what they have doing. I would like to see them come in and ask questions in a different way that maybe changes some of the ways that we would be looking, or maybe gives us a direction. I know when I talk to a lot of board of directors for our clients. And I spend a good bit of time talking to people that we'll say are more advanced in their career, that don't have a fundamental understanding of cybersecurity, but trying to explain to them what the risks are. How do we quantify? How do we measure risks and those kind of things? Without being technical about it. So my hope is that the fundamental changes over there, because of the executive orders and because of the new leadership, maybe that gives us a different lens to be able to put things through, and maybe coming back to the original thing that we were talking about cyber is beyond IT. So there may be some thinking and speculation, opinion, whatever on that side, that maybe CISA and the things that all the good work that Jen Easterly did and the team with all the standards, really the alerting processes, the public outreach, the programs that CISA had. I've really thought that under Jen's leadership, that CISA was more accessible
Mm-hmm.
to people like us than the agency had ever been before. I think the direction of that agency in that really made it less about what the government is doing and what the government wants you to do, and it became more about what do you need help with from the government to do. There just seemed to be a real fundamental shift there. So I do hope that continues with her departure.
Well, I think you've definitely given me something to keep an eye on. Brian, this has been a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you spending some time with me. If listeners are interested in reaching out, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so leapfrogservices.com is the website. You'll find information on the ring of security there. As you can imagine, my email address is first.last, so bryant.tao at leapfrogservices.com. You can email me there, and I would be happy to answer any questions or continue the conversation. And, a lot of things when you got 30 minutes on a couple topics, right? So getting into like dark web and dark GBTs and how that's affecting cyber and attackers and what it's enabling them to do on the AI side, right? So there's lots and lots of topics that we can talk about.
Certainly, we could be going for hours, but we do need to be careful with
Absolutely.
everybody's time. Brian, this has been such fun. Thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. Y'all have a good day.
And I want to preview an upcoming interview that I've got releasing soon. And James D. Wilton joined me. He's the author of Capturing Value. Now, he delved into some innovative SaaS pricing strategies, particularly the rise of outcome-based pricing and its implication for service providers. He shared his insights on how businesses can create value effectively for customers when navigating the challenges of pricing differentiation and packaging to enhance profitability and customer engagement. Here's a preview of that interview.
The one that everybody's talking about right now, which is also very relevant for services actually, is outcome-based pricing, which is where instead of pricing in a traditional way and scaling by traditional metrics like in a SaaS company often by number of seats, or in a service company just by number of hours of different people, you are charging for something which relates to the outcome which the offering gets. So how much value is created, charging based on that. I will say that it's interesting because outcome-based pricing has always been there, and it's always been held up as this thing which is, in theory, the gold standard of pricing. It's perfect, right? Because you can charge for exactly what kinds of value you are producing, but it's practically quite difficult to do because you need to be able to get the customer to agree that that's the right level, that's the right way to price for the beginning.
We talk about value and delivering value to customers all the time. We dove right into how to do value pricing and what it means. This interview is already available for my Patreon supporters. They already have it. If you want to sign up there, it'll drop on the weekend on YouTube and the podcast feed for everyone else. If you're interested, I really do encourage you to listen. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to get access to that interview right now. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on this live show. It's a simple monthly subscription. Visit patreon.com/MSP Radio to learn more. And listeners, you can support the show. Like, share, and follow on your favorite platforms, or support directly on Patreon with our Give What You Want model. You set what you think the content is worth, and you get access to the videos early. If you have a question and are listening to the recording, send it in at question@mspradio.com. Thanks for joining me for the Business of Tech Lounge, and I will see you next time.